First of all, thanks for having me today to Abby and Co. Before I start, I need to issue what they call a trigger warning. So in the story I'm going to tell, there is a part of it which is a little bit sensitive. Now, if anybody feels at all triggered by that, I personally have no problem with you just getting up and walking out. So I like to start with that. Okay, so what if we could build our resilience by flicking a light switch? Now, I don't think that's actually possible, but I do think resilience is a skill that we can build. But I think we need to think about it using the light analogy more like a dimmer switch, that we can slowly turn the brightness up bit by bit. Now, I'm going to share today how I built my resilience and how that resilience took me from, frankly, a place of despair and rock bottom to the life I lead today, where I've never felt fitter and I've never been happier. Now, I'm also going to share how, having worked in the corporate world for the last 25 years as a consultant program manager for brands like Volkswagen, Jaguar Land Rover and Lloyds Bank, how my resilience is relevant to the workplace. Okay, so I'm going to take us back to 1976. Apart from Pete, was anybody actually born in 1976? A few. I've got a few on my side. So 1976 was famous for a long, hot summer. Some of you may remember that. 1976, I think, was a time where the UK was also still fairly popular in Europe. The reason I know that is we won the Eurovision Song Contest. Has anybody got any idea who the band was that won it for us? Brotherhood of Man. Brilliant. Can you name the record? I'd love to see your record collection. It's bad, yeah. Vast, oh right, okay. Eclectic, I think they call it. So I'm going to take us back to a particular day in 1976. It was the 10th of May, it was a Monday, and it was a school day when my life changed forever. Now, up until that point, my life had been idyllic, really. My memories were of a young lad being outside all the time from breakfast till it went dark, playing sport, riding our bikes, building dens, jumping in to lakes and canals, generally having a great time. These are a few pictures of my childhood. Some interesting clothing going on here. My brother, the shorter one in the middle picture, he's now a fairly successful entrepreneur. Probably quite difficult to make that link from the look on his face in that picture. And here's me on Filey Beach in Yorkshire, where my dad's family came from. Looks like I'm digging for gold. But I was looking at this yesterday, actually, and any cricket fans in here? One or two cricket fans. I'm not sure Mo Bobat's made it yet. Pete, I know you're a big cricketer. Even though I'm digging there, Pete, I think I'm showing a pretty good shape there for a bit of a lofted drive back over the bowler's head. Oh, come on, head down, eye on the ball, surely. The cricketers will recognise that. So life was pretty good. This was the house I lived in, a fairly Middle England house in South Leicestershire. That arrow points to my bedroom, clearly. The reason I've done that is my bedroom appears twice in this story. I also want to introduce you to my mum, who is a main character in this story as well. So I'm going to take us back to the 10th of May, 1976. So that day had been like any other day. Now in the evening, we had a babysitter because my mum worked part-time in a local restaurant in Leicester. So she wasn't due back until about 10 o'clock. My dad, who's a professor of X-ray astronomy, he's a physicist, space scientist, he was giving a lecture up in Durham and wasn't due back until late. He was due home about 10 o'clock, about the same time as my mum. but the trains were all cocked up, so he had a problem getting back. We didn't know any of this at the time. So that night, I couldn't sleep. So when I heard my mum come in and the babysitter talking to my mum downstairs, I thought, I'll go downstairs and say goodnight. Now, as I came down our stairs, which came down and then round a corner, as it came round the corner, I peeled back because mum was with a man. Well, that was highly unusual, and that never happened in our house, certainly not at that time of night. So anyway, I stayed out of sight, the babysitter left, mum and this man went into the kitchen and made a cup of tea, and then they went into the lounge, and I couldn't work out what was going on, but I decided I wasn't going to go and show myself. Now, it turns out that mum had offered to help this guy who was having problems. She worked with him, he was the chef, and she offered to give him some help over a cup of tea. So I was trying to listen to what was going on halfway up the stairs through an air vent, but I couldn't really hear, so I sneaked downstairs, commando style, crawled across the dining room, and just peeped my head round the corner, and the door was slightly ajar. And I could see the two of them sat on the settee. And the conversation then transpired into, he started making sexual advances towards my mum. And I heard my mum say, you can stop that, that's not what we're here for. So I'm now getting fairly anxious. I climb back up to the halfway point on the stairs, and I can hear conversation, but not the words. And then the conversation stopped. There were 3 loud thumps. I didn't know what they were, but I think I can guess what they were now. And then silence. Then all of a sudden, the lounge door flew open, the kitchen door flew open, there were cupboards and drawers banging, things dropping on the floor. Whoever that was went back into the lounge and slammed the lounge door closed, and then silence. Now I'm now scared. I decided to go back to my bedroom, and I just lay in bed. I don't know for how long, maybe 15 minutes. The next thing I hear is footsteps coming up the stairs, slowly, one by one. And I'm in my bedroom, and my bedroom door then it was half open, it gets fully opened, and all I can hear is panicky breathing. You know, kind of out of control, out of breath. Now at this point, I know that's not my mum, and I know there's a problem downstairs, but I don't know what it is. So this noise came closer to me and was hovering over me, and I was just pretending to be asleep, lying on my right-hand side, facing the wall. Eventually, the person left, opened the other doors, and I heard footsteps down the stairs, and that's the last I heard for about 2 hours. The next thing was a loud banging from downstairs, which sounded like windows. So I just gambled that that was my dad. I flew down the stairs, threw the curtains open. My dad's there, can't get in. And the key was still on the inside of the lock on the kitchen door. So I went round to the front, let my dad in, and what we discovered in the lounge was a horror scene. I'm trying to keep the detail brief, but it was a horror scene. She'd been stabbed lots of times. She was dead. And my last image of my mum was not only that, she had her underwear and her trousers around her ankles where he'd had his way anyway. Now, Dad ripped me out of the house. We went across to the neighbours and called the police. The guy who did it was caught within hours. He got life in prison, whatever that means these days. In his defence, he said when she turned him down for sex, he went to the kitchen to get a knife to threaten her, to force her, and he blanked out. Only he knows the real story. Right, that's the end of the worst bit. So we can start building ourselves back up from there. Now the thing is, this was 1976. And we had absolutely no idea what to do. So I'd gone from, I'm not looking for sympathy for this, I'd gone from with a CID at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning and back to school the next day. Now that's kind of unthinkable in the modern era, but that's what happened then. And there was a family decision never to talk about that again. So we actually moved in with our neighbours. which looked directly opposite to our old house. And things did kind of settle down for a while. Things kind of got back to normal. You know, we were at school, Dad was back at work, we were living with another family. There wasn't any obvious changes. I was getting into a little bit of trouble and detention at school, but I'm not sure that was a new thing. I do remember my my end of year report, which was summarised by my form tutor. If a terrorist organisation were to detonate a large charge under David's chair, I'm not convinced he would notice. So you can imagine how proud I was walking home with that to present to my dad. There you go, Dad, that's what I've been doing this year. But it wasn't till later on, and I don't know why there's a gap of, let's say, 7 or 8 years, that what we now know as PTSD manifested itself. But there was a gap. I've had several explanations, but none I'm particularly happy with. So the question is, what is PTSD? We talk about it all the time these days, don't we? But what is PTSD? Well, PTSD wasn't even a label until 1980. Before then, the best you could do to describe the effects of a major trauma was World War I, shell shock. World War II, battle fatigue it became. Battle fatigue. You're being shot at and shelled in grimy, cold, dingy trenches day after day after day. Battle fatigue. I'm a little bit tired. You know, it's ridiculous. Before PTSD, that became hysterical neurosis. I mean, seriously. You know, the UK is a pretty intelligent, developed society, and that's the best we can do. But for me, it manifested itself as panic and anxiety. I could go for a week without eating a single thing, without having a single minute of sleep. Such was the adrenaline and the fear that's so claustrophobic, you feel like you're being buried alive. There were 3 times in my life when I don't know what there was left between me and giving up. Well, I do know what was left. It was hope. And I thank God for that hope, because without that hope, I think, you know, I may have taken the next step. So PTSD, what does it do? Well, we know it changes our beliefs. It makes us frightened of the world. The world seems a scary place. And people start blaming themselves, especially in traumatized people. They say that the trauma was actually their fault, which is quite hard to believe. The other thing to do is it impacts the brain. So we know that we've got brain waves, alpha, theta, beta, delta in our brain, and they are upset by trauma, and they go on to cause us unsettling problems with our body. But there's a thing here, this red light that you can see at the back, that's representing the amygdala, the old mammalian part of the brain that keeps us safe when we're faced with saber-toothed tigers. But this part of the brain is just switched on. It's always on. It's called the alarm system. But the problem with that is that overrides every other part of the brain. So when you're saying, don't be silly, you can do this, etc., that is overriding it. So it makes it very difficult. The other thing that happens is our central nervous system gets out of balance. We've got 2 parts of the central nervous system. One is like the calming part, and one's like the bit that gets us going when we need it. When trauma happens, both of these are on. The sympathetic, the bits that keeps us going, is dominant. It's too dominant. And what all of that means also is we're creating far too much adrenaline and far too much cortisol. And the best description I've heard for that from a psychiatrist who went on to become a friend was, he said, Dave, think of it like you're running a car with your foot flat on the accelerator and flat on the brake at the same time. It's just going to blow up. So the next question is, well, what can you do about that? Well, sadly, mainstream medicine doesn't have many answers. When I first went to the doctors back in 1983-ish, I was there 3 times in a week, and I could tell he was getting pissed off with me. So he leant back in his chair and he said, to be honest, Mr. Pounds, you're going to have to pull yourself together. Now, I'm not sure we're a lot further forward now than we were then. We are a bit further forward. We've got some smarter drugs. But drugs are never going to cure the problem, are they? And they often come with side effects. You might get signposted onto a psychologist, but that may take several months. Well, your need is now, so several months is pretty hopeless. But I think there is hope, and we're going to touch on some of those things today. Now, PTSD impacts all of those areas, I've just described, and it impacts them to quite a high level. But when we talk about burnout in the workplace, which we know is an increasing challenge and problem in the workplace, we also know that burnout affects the same areas that PTSD does. So this is what's happening to our bodies. So if I wind forward, in between today and then, 3+ decades, three things have characterised that period of time. Number one, to the rest of the world, it looked like I'd got life sorted because I didn't talk about this. I mean, I was 12 when my mum was murdered. I was 33 or 34 when I spoke to my dad about it for the first time and beginning to have all sorts of problems. So to the outside world, Dave's got life sorted, great family, lots of friends, plays loads of team sport, seems to have a good job. He's collected the badges society tells us to collect, like, flash car and nice house. But behind the scenes, the PTSD was hitting harder and harder and harder. The second thing that characterised those 3+ decades was a relentless search for solutions. My family told me times, will you get off that bloody laptop? But I've seen over 60 therapists. I've tried over 3 dozen therapies. I've read countless books, medical journals and research papers looking for solutions. Now, most of them turned out to be fairly ineffective, but there is a collection I'm going to reference today that has made all the difference to me. And the third thing was, towards the latter part of that period, I just had a reliance on drink. It was great when it was in the sporting environment and with friends after work and so on. But drink became a relaxant, and that grew a bigger and bigger part of my life. And frankly, it ended up with countless hospitalizations, 3 rehab centres. I was in such a mess, and I'm only going back a few years. I'm completely sober now. Going back a few years to when I was last in hospital. I was unable to walk without a Zimmer frame. Now I'm playing football with kids in their 20s. Such was the damage to my nervous system through the alcohol. But rehab was actually a turning point for me. So when I came out of rehab, I was sober. And once I'd been sober for quite a while, a few months, that sober platform became a platform for change. That change became building my resilience, and that resilience became Design for Life, the program that I now talk about. So Design for Life, well, for me, out of all those therapists and books and therapies, there were 19 pillars, if you like, or modules that I call them, that have made a massive difference to my resilience. Now, we're going to talk about 3 of them briefly today, and then I'm going to show how I think that is relevant to the workplace. So, 3 anecdotes. Number 1, facing fear. I had a list of fears like you wouldn't believe. The periods where I couldn't leave the house, I couldn't drive. A big fear of mine was flying. So I didn't fly for over 25 years. And as a kid, we flew all over the place, a lot of the time with my dad's job. So how do you face a fear that you've avoided for 25 years? Well, what you need is a plan of small steps that slowly exposes you to that fear. You face the fear, but what you also need is some support while you're doing it. So you need your team, if you like. I had a therapist who went on to become a great friend, and now we're talking about doing some work together, Derek Farrell. And he was the UK's leading expert in a therapy called EMDR. Has anybody ever heard of that? Yeah. It's a fascinating therapy. And basically, this is going to make it sound a bit odd, but there's loads of research to prove its efficacy. But basically, you think of an old trauma that's really painful, and you move your eyes from left to right. And moving your eyes from left to right basically disturbs or agitates your memory consolidation. So the idea is you don't forget the trauma, but you take the emotional sting out of it. But what they found is that can also be used for imagining future events. So what I used it for was imagining the flight and just thinking of flying, cold sweat. Oh no, I'm not going there. Anyway, we executed the plan, flew to Edinburgh from East Midlands on a little propeller plane. Within 12 months, I've flown 16 times. That is neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself. And that is a gift. Once we have it, we think, wow, what else can I do with that? I got back on the bus after that flight to Edinburgh and I said to my mate, oh, that's nice. That young lad over there is dressed up as a pilot. And Jim said, that is the pilot. I mean, he looked about 12. If I'd seen him taking the wheel on that, I'd have been back into the terminal. So the second anecdote I want to share is MDMA therapy. Who knows what MDMA is?
The drug. The drug.
The drug MDMA. So it's the main ingredient in ecstasy, the street drug. So it's the love drug. Now, having had, I've drunk enough alcohol to sink a fleet of ships, but I've never had a drug as such. But I now think they should put MDA in the water system because it is incredible. So I got myself on the UK's first ever MDMA therapy trial. And I'm going to share my first experience. There's a clip of this as part of a Netflix series called How to Change Your Mind, Psychedelic Therapy. It's a really, really great program and promises some amazing solutions for trauma. So I'm in a hospital, nice room, 2 therapists. They don't push you in any direction. You've got an eye mask on, there's music playing. They just say, see what comes up. Now I know mum is the central part of the issue I was trying to solve. So I'm on the bed and all of a sudden an image of me being back in my bedroom the night my mum was killed came to mind. But instead of it being dark and frightening, I was sat back in bed, sat up, the room was warmly lit, I'm on my pillows, I'm in my pyjamas, and the perpetrator is at the end of my bed. And I just looked at him and I said, I'm pretty sure I know what you've done downstairs. And I'm pretty sure you could kill me, but I want you to know I'm not frightened of you anymore. Then my mum came into the image, she sat on the edge of my bed and we asked him, why have you done this? What's made you do this? You're probably going to go to prison for a long time. But you've got to understand why you did this so you can start healing yourself. Where has that come from? All I'd felt before was anger towards the man. Now, this is a story for another day, but I'll tell part of it now. That nagged me afterwards, long after the MDMA had cleared away. It nagged me. Why had I asked him that question? And I pondered that for a long time. And I think I got to the conclusion that something in his past had made him react like that. Now, I don't know what that was. We know he was in the army. He was only 24. He was a lot younger than my mum. But we don't know why he did it. But I think something in his past, and given that sweet spot, if you like, or set of circumstances where he was highly charged sexually and he'd been rejected, turned down, he went ballistic. And I wonder whether he actually had any choice in that at all, or whether something so overwhelming took control of him. Now, we can argue about that one. The third example is purpose. So purpose is a popular topic, isn't it? We're all talking about, I want to find purpose. Well, most things have got a purpose, but purpose to me, I found out, well, purpose to me means doing something that matters. And when this, like most things, it took a few experiences for this to become really obvious to me. When I'd been sober for about 7 months, I was invited back to the Priory to share my story. And I did that because when other people were sharing their stories for me, I found that really powerful, inspirational, the power of storytelling. So I went back and I shared my story, and there was laughter, there was tears, there was hugs, there was swapping numbers. And I came out of that session, I had to ring my best mate, and I rang my brother and I said, I have no words. What I feel now is nothing like family or business or sport. You know, it's just different. There's some sort of human connectedness. And that stayed with me for quite a while. And I was wondering what it was. And I worked out was because it mattered. It mattered to them and it mattered to me. And that whole process of reflection has led to where I am today. So I used to love my job, but I felt that this was a sign, a bit of a calling really, to do something different. So when I think about those three anecdotes, what does all of that mean? This has got battery running low close on it, so my flicker isn't working. So when I think about that and what it all means and how change happens, this is where I've got to. This is just my view. So I think, whilst we're born the same in many ways, you know, Maslow describes us as having the same needs from, you know, safety up to sort of self-actualization. I think we're also very unique as human beings, aren't we? Because we've had a unique set of experiences in our lives. And those experiences shape our beliefs. And our beliefs shape our feelings. And of course, our feelings drive our behaviours. And I think flying is an example of that. So let's say you and I are going on a flight, the same flight. We may or may not know each other, don't know. But you're feeling like, oh, I've had a heck of a week, can't wait to get on the plane, gin and tonic, bit of a snooze, read a book. And in the lounge beforehand, you know, you're relaxing, maybe meditate, make a few calls. You're in a pretty good place. I'm thinking, I know what the data is, 17 million to 1 that plane's going to crash. That's the one. So I'm feeling super anxious. So my belief is the plane's going to crash. I'm feeling super anxious. So my behaviour, I'm in the bar and I'm having 8 pints just to take the edge off. But what's happened when I faced the fear of flying, and what happened when I changed anger to understanding something in this man's past had made him do what he did, is I'm basically going through a set of different experiences that have then gone to change my beliefs. So what I'm kind of positing here is if we can design those experiences based on an outcome we want here, then all of this will follow. You know, we will feel different. It's kind of how else could it be? You know, I know we're born slightly differently. You might be a brilliant footballer and I will never be that. You might be a brilliant musician and you an artist. And, you know, I think those things are kind of built, but our beliefs, I think, are largely shaped through our experiences. So, I think the other thing I have to say is that was only possible with a solid foundation. So my foundation was being sober. I made sure I surrounded myself with the right people. So negative naysayers, they were all gone. You know, I spend my time with people who are challenging, stimulating, educating, fun. That's really important to me. You know, I look after my physical fitness and my diet. All those things are important. So, why does that matter in the workplace? Why does my resilience matter to the workplace? Well, I think of it like this. So if a company is really, really clear on its purpose, and a company has a really clear strategy in terms of how to deliver that purpose and what its deliverables look like, it still needs something else. It still needs people. Well, the thing is, if you look at that, the purpose and the strategy, the deliverables, they can be fixed for a good period of time, can't they? But the variable is the people. How do I know how you're going to show up tomorrow? You might be brilliant today, you might be awful tomorrow, depending on what's going on in your life. So people are the variable. And to kind of highlight that point, the human variable, I want to share some data. So there's a very famous study called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study that's been replicated over 200 times, and it always shows the same thing. More than half of children, by the time they're 18, have experienced at least one major trauma. And this study has a list of 10. There are many more possibilities of 10, so actually that number's a lot further north than 50%. Now those people are in your offices. Those people are here today. Because the data also shows that this isn't particular to any salary band. This isn't particular to any postcode. This is impacting the wider population. Most of you will have heard of an international company called Gallup. They've been running a workplace survey since 2012, I think. And in 2012, the UK workforce was described as, on average, having 17% of its workforce described as engaged in their job. That's now 10%, and it's been consistently dropping over the years because workplaces are getting tougher to work in. Now, when they say engaged, what they mean by that is people who are enthusiastic about their job and committed to the company they work for. So that's engaged. 10%. But that's a scandal, isn't it? The final bit I want to share is the World Economic Forum has produced a report of the most desired skills by companies over the next 5 years. And it has resilience in its top few. I think it's probably its top 3. It's resilience, agility, and something else. So the World Economic Forum is saying resilience is going to be needed. Now, if you think about the landscape we've got today in the workplace, the World Economic Forum is actually recognising burnout as a thing, and not just a thing that is becoming more common. The World Economic Forum says the rate of technology is changing, with AI and so on. That's gonna, upset the workplace. That's going to affect jobs. It also recognises, other world events like COVID and Brexit and world wars and so on. But if we come back to these first 2 pieces of data and think about the workplace, add them together. So let's say, well, half of my office has had at least one trauma. That's before they're 18, let alone what happens in, adult life, financial issues, relationship issues, health issues. They're all happening, and those people are in your offices, but they're coming to the office with a badge on. I'm a professional, I'm this and I'm that. And they don't want to talk about that sort of thing. And if they are having problems, when they go to the doctors, it's either a pill or a therapist in 3 months' time. That's not making a lot of difference. So they're struggling. Add in the 10%, and you think, well, only 1 in 10 of them are happy in the job. We've got a fairly desperate position, haven't we? But the question is, what can we do about that? Well, I think the key to that is we need to motivate the staff and we need to look after them. And when we do that, engagement goes up, and when engagement goes up, performance goes up. And there's loads of data for the numbers men on the exec that says lift engagement, performance goes up, and that has a direct correlation to even share price, turnover, staff retention, ability to recruit staff. They are all impacted by engagement and performance. So how's that relevant to the 3 anecdotes that I've just shared? Well, facing fear. What was that? That was facing fear with my team, Derek, the EMDR specialist, and my best mate, Jim. Is everybody familiar with the challenge support matrix? So it's a really cool thing that describes the intersection of challenge and support. So if we take this in a workplace context, if you have high challenge and low support, what you end up with is burnout. If you have high challenge and high support, what you end up with growth and high performance. Well, which one do we want? We obviously want growth and performance. Now, not only is that relevant to performance, it's actually a fun thing to do. It's really satisfying to take on a challenge and achieve it. But you need the right support to be able to do that. And of course, once you've overcome some challenges, what happens is your confidence goes up and you feel like, you've achieved something worthwhile. And when your confidence goes up, your resilience builds. The second thing is understanding people. Well, you've only got to look at the data to know that understanding people and meeting their basic needs, they want to be valued, they want to be listened to, they want to be recognised, they want to feel safe. So as leaders, we need to make an environment like that so that our people feel cared for. Now, I'm not talking about creating namby-pamby environments. I think challenge support is really important. At the end of the day, the business has to perform, doesn't it? But I think we have to look after our people. And kindness and empathy spin off understanding. And kindness and empathy, well, what are they? I think they should be more deeply explored. They're not complicated, but they deserve more deep exploration. Because it's dead easy to be kind to somebody when you're feeling good and they're your mate. But how about when you're not feeling good and they've frustrated you with something in the office? There's a few pieces of research that looked at why medical teams were so successful during COVID. Being a medical professional during COVID must have been really tough. And the research shows every time what kept the teams resilient was camaraderie, altruistic behaviour. Now there's a lesson in there for us in the workplace. And the final thing, purpose. So why has Dave got a sack of carrots on his slide? Well, when I was at JLR, we were building 6 potential business cases for the exec. And one of them was around goodwill. So they were spending millions on goodwill and not seeing any positive effect at JLR. So we went out on the road and we ended up at Northampton Jaguar Land Rover, and we discovered a case study. And this woman had been in and out of the workshop for about 3 weeks, repeatedly trying to fix a problem with her Range Rover. And what Jaguar Land Rover used to do is they used to give Amazon vouchers for 200 quid, 300 quid. Well, that's really nice, isn't it? But when you're running a £100,000 car, what difference is a £200 voucher going to make to how you feel about the problems you faced? But this particular person at Jaguar in Northampton that had been looking after the customer, she made it her business to kind of make friends with this owner of the Land Rover. So long story short, she found out that the owner was passionate about horses. Horses were her thing. And when this owner drove off in her Land Rover, the next time she went to her stables and opened a boot, there was a massive sack of carrots in the boot. Now that caused her to burst into tears because she felt cared for and listened to. And she wrote to Jaguar in Northampton, and she was probably a more loyal customer than she was before she had the trouble. The thing here, and the thing with my purpose and what I'm doing today, is it's what matters that motivates people. If you can find what matters to people, that will be the motivating factor. So I think in the workplace, there's 2 ways to do that. One is find out about them as individuals, so your values will be different to mine and different to the ones plastered all over the company walls and different to yours. So as a leader, I want to know what your values are. So can I shape your job so that it better meets your values? Whatever that looks like. It might be the job role, it might be the conditions you work in, but I want to support you. But I also think is, whilst we all think we know what our jobs are, do we really deeply understand why they matter? So we might be familiar with why we do things for our upstream and downstream first line stakeholders. But what about the second and third line stakeholders? We'll go and have a conversation with them and say, when I send you this report on a Friday, what do you actually do with it? And why does it matter? I could do with it on a Thursday morning, really, because what that would do is just have those conversations and understand why things matter. So can you imagine 2 scenarios before I close? If you could lift engagement up, so if your resilience was where I think we can all get to, And that lifted engagement by 10%. That's double what we've got. But what if you could lift it by 20, 30, 40, 50? What difference would that make to the office? Not just in terms of performance, but in terms of how much fun you'd be having. What if building your resilience led you to make one better decision a week and you had a team of 10? That's 10 better decisions a week. That's 520 better decisions in a year. What difference would that make to the business? So I'll close with this. Resilience is not just grit and guts. The 19 modules in Design for Life have given me much more than a defence mechanism. And I think those 19 modules or pillars are relevant for everybody. So I think they can help you change how you feel, change how you show up in life. As leaders, I think they can help change how you lead. And I think they can help you build teams that everybody wants to be a part of. But you've got to take hold of that dimmer switch and keep nudging the brightness up and up and up. Thank you for listening. Any Q&A? No time.
I think we'll have. Thank you very much, Dave. Firstly, that was a fantastic, fantastic talk. I say we have time for one question for now, and who's the lucky person who can ask that question? I mean, wow. Everyone's aghast. There's no questions, right? No.
Yeah, over here. You talk about neuroplasticity, and I'm quite interested in this topic, and particularly within the business context. What other aspects, of taking MDMA are there to neuroplasticity that help us adapt and change our perspective that you've come across?
Well, I think there's a number of ways of changing our perspectives, and they're covered by some of the 19 modules, which I'm happy to talk to you afterwards about this. But ultimately, if you're changing your experiences and repeating, that is ending up with neuroplasticity, where you just think, as your default position is you think differently. I think the other thing that's been really important to me is, we know that trauma and burnout gets stored in the body. So unlocking a way to reset the nervous system was really crucial for me. I obviously tried many things to do that, but I now have a way or two ways that I do that. And it's a game changer. My shoulders were always up here and everything was rigid. My breathing was shallow, but that's all gone now.
Thank you.
Cool, thanks. Is it lunch?
Oh, it's not, but thank you very much, Dave. I think one more round of applause for Dave.